Hi, I'm Cindy Cloward with Riley Blake Designs, and today Lori Holt is in the studio for our next sew along, and we are going to talk about how to bake a quilt with our Let's Bake sew along.
Yeah, I'm super excited about this one. This is my quilt. It's called Let's Bake, and it's made with my latest collection, which is Bake Sale 2.
Lots of bright colors,
from
all
the memories,
vintage.
yes, from the memories of baking in the kitchen, which with my mom and my 3 older sisters, because she's the one who taught me to bake. And
look at this vintage trim embellished around there.
I love
so
all the
cute.
little details. I use that for the cords as well. But she's the one who taught me and my 3 older sisters to bake. And so I thought it would be really fun to just kind of do a collection of the memories from that. So this one represents my mom, and then there's 4 half aprons in the quilt.
And look at those.
And
each of those are individually.
These represent.
You've got everything from the buttons
my
to the
sisters.
trim.
Yeah.
And what's new with this sew along is you're going to talk about cross stitching, and lots of people have cross stitched. I love to cross stitch, but others haven't. But you've
And
got
this,
a lot
particularly on the gingham, this one, on this gingham is just cross stitch, but on this and also the dish towel that's hanging on the oven is chicken scratch stitching.
And you're going to talk in detail on your blog during the sew along how this technique, lots of techniques in this quilt.
Yeah, I learned to cross stitch on gingham from my grandma when I was very young, and also to do chicken scratch or hopscotch. Some people call it hopscotch, some call it chicken scratch.
So that's a lot of fun. You also have this recipe here that's cross stitch.
Yes, that's my mom's
cake. Is this an
actual
recipe?
It is. That's my mom's, just a basic cake recipe.
Well, that looks delicious, and this is going to be so much fun to sew along with, and you'll even have a recipe you can make from your quilt.
That's right.
That's why we're going to bake a quilt, and this is what we're going to be demonstrating today, and just talk about the pies we're going to make, Lori.
That's right. There's 3 blocks in the quilt right here, and these 2 are completed, and I'm going to show you how to do the aqua pie.
Okay.
I'm also going to be showing you just a little bit about cross stitching on the gingham with my new chunky thread.
Okay, so next we're going to show you all the supplies you're going to need to make this quilt. So now we've got all the supplies set up, and we're going to talk about what you need to make this quilt in the sew along. So the first thing you need is to go to our website, RileyBlakeDesigns.com, and download the Let's Bake Sew Along Guide. So Lori, talk a little bit about the guide.
Okay, so this is the sew along guide. It's not a pattern because I do the tutorials for each block, very detailed on my blog each week. But you will need the guide, and in it, it has the fabric requirements and the cutting. Also, all of the embroidery patterns, all of the supplies needed, all of the cross stitch patterns, the schedule in order of which we're doing the blocks, the finishing of the quilt, that kind of thing.
It's 21 pages and it's packed, and it's not the entire pattern, so know that you get your week-to-week sewing guide from your sewing tips from Lori's blog. So these are the supplies that you'll need. An essential supply is the Sew Simple shapes, the Let's Bake. And these are the shapes that you'll need to make all the applique pieces on the quilt. So those are essential. The sew-in interfacing is what you use to sew the applique, Lori Holt's method. And so that is needed, and this is what we recommend to go along with the Sew Simple shapes. The point-to-point turner is an excellent tool, highly recommended to make your shapes perfect for applique. So that's recommended. Sue Daly's applique glue. We use this a lot in the sew along, so this is recommended. Trim it rulers. We recommend 3 different sizes to trim up your pieces. This Seam Sew Easy for your piece blocks is recommended for your sewing machine to get your pieces accurate. Also, 4 different sizes of the bias tape makers, because we use them all throughout the quilt. And you've got some new chunky thread that you use.
Yes, we're going to be using my new chunky thread for the cross stitch on the gingham. And that's just for the cross stitch, but for the other embroidery we'll be using the RF floss. And then if you have this Be Happy RFL set, it's the 45 spool set. It matches all of my fabrics.
It's got everything in there.
And it's got 50 weight for machine applique and sewing, and it's got 80 weight for hand applique. But that's a lot of colors for this quilt, because this quilt only has this amount of colors in it, and it happens to match my So Cherry too. So if you have this collection, you can use this one as well.
So if you haven't invested in that, that will work.
Yes.
Good point.
So also what's new for this is my vintage trim. It's rickrack, and we're using this large size for the binding of the quilt. And then all 6 of these colors, we're using some yardage of it for like embellishing the aprons. The small red one is for the cords on the mixers and things like that. And then the new buttons, jar number 3, is the 3rd in this set. And I've kind of used a mix of all of them just for embellishments, but you can use whatever colors that you want. But all of these buttons match all of my fabrics.
And I still love these jars. They're so fun.
Yes.
So a couple new things that aren't mentioned in the Sew Along guide is the nifty needles. You have a brand new needle set that we're going to talk about later. But
yes, I'll show you the inside a little bit later.
This is a nice thing to have in your sewing room. Again, this is a fun thing. We're working with a Pleasant Home on their pin bowls. Everyone loves these pin bowls, but this pin bowl has your design on it.
Yes.
So that's fun.
I love Jody's pin bowls.
Yeah, me too. You can't have enough of those pin bowls. And then we have the Easy Trace, your light box. It's huge, and I love that it has the measuring tape on the side, and it's great for your tracing your embroidery patterns.
Yes, that's what we'll be using it for.
So now we're going to clear this all away, and we're going to talk about our pies, how to make our pies.
Let's bake some pies. Okay, so what we need are our Sew Simple shapes, E14 for the top and E15 for the pie and for the pie plate. And you just trace around the templates onto the interfacing, and then you match up, you know, with the fabric, and you're going to sew.
And we've done this on other sew-alongs.
That's right. So your right side of your fabric is going to be facing up, and you just sew directly on the line. And I like that you can see through this interfacing, so you can fussy cut like the little pie plate.
It's just strong enough to turn it. And a reminder, don't start on the corners or the curves. Just start on a edge that you can go over.
So this one, this shape, I've already sewn an aqua one and turned it. Then I used this turner, you know, to push out the points and make it smooth, and then I pressed it flat. This one is sewn, and I don't know if you can see, but I started here and started sewing all the way around, and then I over sewed by about an inch, and then I just sew off the edge.
So you don't have to back stitch, just over stitch.
That protects your stitching. So after it's sewn, let me get this one out of the way. After it's sewn, I just simply take scissors and trim around it by a quarter of an inch, maybe a little smaller than a quarter of an inch. It doesn't have to be exact. You don't want them great, you know, great big seams, but you don't want them too tiny, because if they're too small of seams, they tend to not want to lay flat. They kind of want to flip up or out.
Yeah, so, I love that little scalloped pie edge. Very cute.
Yeah, these shapes are fun, and you can do other things with these shapes too besides just the top of a pie. I was thinking on this shape, it would be really cute as the top of a really wide flower, you know, like a tulip.
Oh, yeah.
You could have like a stem and some leaves and stuff. But after I trim that around, then I take some small scissors. I don't want to use my large scissors for this because I really want to have control. But I want to clip these little cleavages right here. So this is just a cleavage, so it only needs one clip. But what I do is I clip right to the thread and not past it, because I don't want to clip into my sewing. But I just do one clip, And if I don't do this, especially on these little curves, it will not lie flat when we turn it right side out. So I do this before I even cut my little slit in the back, you know, to turn it, to make sure that I've remembered to cut those. If you don't do it all the way to the thread, it might have a problem turning as well. So now those are all clipped, and you can use little scissors or you can use your seam ripper if you feel brave. And what I do is I just kind of start with my seam ripper kind of on the side, and I make sure by feeling under here that it is not poking through. And I just go ahead. And for this pie, you really only need one cut. You don't really need to do an X like I do for the other ones. Then I just go ahead and turn right side out. And then this is where my tool really comes in handy to shape this thing. I let it do most of the work. So I just start, and I have my interfacing facing up and my fabric down, and I have this end right here. And I just want to shape those curves. And what I do is when there's a little flat spot, I'm pushing on the fabric just a little bit, not a lot, because I don't want to poke through. And I'm
a little stretch.
Moving back and forth because it's cotton. It stretches. So you see where that little flat spot is stretching out now.
It works
so
out.
See, there's a little curve right there. And then I just continue on. And
in your other ones, when you've done circles, and you do have circles, it works so well because the fabric has give.
Right. I wouldn't want to do it without this turner. And you know what I use it for is it's like because I want to get my finger in there and I want to, you know, smooth it out. But obviously that won't work for these small pieces. So I use the next best thing. I used to use like the end of a crochet hook that was rounded when I did this, but once this little point-to-point turner by Clover came to my attention, I started using it, and it just works perfectly. So this one I'm just kind of pushing out gently, and I'm always using gentle pressure. Like I'm not really pushing because I really don't want to push a hole through my fabric. But if you do, by chance, you know, that does happen sometimes. If you push a little bit of hole through there, then you can kind of fix that if the threads are kind of sticking out because you have a hole. When you go to applique, if you're hand appliquing, you use your needle to tuck that under, or machine applique, you can use like your tailor's awl or something to push those threads under before you do the little stitch around it. So this is what I do. I just make, on these outer curves, I just kind of roll them so that they're out and kind of finger press it a little bit. Like I say, because it's cotton, it does have that give, and it does have a good memory, meaning it wants to stay where you've creased it. And then that one looks a little bit, I just want to curve that one a little bit. Then I bring them over to the iron, and I just give it a quick press.
And now we're ready for our embroidery.
Yes, so before you want to applique, we'll be laying it out on here to applique, you want to do your embroidery. Because, I mean, you could do it after, but you really don't want to be going through all of those layers. So this is when you take the pattern.
And this is from the Let's Bake Sew Along Guide, and it tells you the pie right there.
And it always has a little guide on each one of where you lie the edge of your fabric so that you can see
on this light
how far down.
And you can just see perfectly through that. We line that up.
And you can center it with that center teardrop shape.
And we can even
well, you could do that, but this is also the center of that scallop right here is the center.
Perfect.
So
we have that centered. And then we just take our pencil.
And I just use a mechanical pencil because I know that my threads are going to cover that. And you can easily see through the light box. It works really awesome.
And I love this light box. Okay.
Okay, so now we've got the little teardrops on there. And so I'm going to use an embroidery needle and 6 strands of my Aura floss. So do you want to see inside?
Yeah, and this is exciting because we worked hard on these, didn't we, Lori?
That's right. I really wanted my needles color-coded, so because I get a lot of questions on what size needle, what type needle do you use for what type of, you know, thing that you're doing, and so I thought I would just compile all my favorites, what I use for everything, and put in here. But then I wanted you to be able to know what they were. So yeah, I have them labeled here, what I use them for, but you know, we all take needles out of the needle book and we stick them in our pin cushion, and so it's like, now I forgot what that was. Needle? Like, was that a sewing needle? Was that for binding? Do I use that for embroidery? So that's why I color-coded them, so that you know, you can get to memorize that the aqua is for embroidery. And then I'll be showing you my chunky needles when I do the cross stitch with my chunky thread here in a bit.
So you would grab, and you also have a guide on the back too, which is nice. Your embroidery, and it tells you embroidery.
And you know, you can use them for whatever you want, but this is just what my guide is, what I use for my favorite things, my favorite sizes.
So you are embroidering, and so you are using the blue.
Yes, and I'm using the largest blue that there is because I'm using all 6 strands of this floss, and it works perfectly. So I'm going to bring it over here so that you can see a little bit better, and I'm just going to show you how to do this 1 teardrop shape, and I'm just going to bring my needle up right in the corner. So what this is going to be is just a simple back stitch. So I go in, and I'm going to be working on the next stitch by coming up. And pull it through. I usually keep my thumb on top to stop from knotting. And then I'm going to go right back in where I came out and set up for the next stitch again. So how you get even stitches with the back stitch is your thread here should be right in the center. And if you use that little trick, then your stitches will always be even. Okay, so now we can get it set up to applique. We'll put the needle back in. It's a little spot.
Love those.
This cute little aqua spot.
Perfect. And
then we're going to bring it over here. I'm going to try to do this upside down. So we're going to measure in 3/4 of an inch. This is a 4.5 by 8.5 inch, so that it finishes at 4 by 8. And I'm just going to measure 3/4 of an inch up, center it, put the pie there. You can either pin it or you can glue it at this point. And then let me just stick a pin in it real quick so that it doesn't,
in place.
Yeah, it doesn't shift while I'm doing this part. And then I'll just line it right up on the 3/4 of an inch here so that the top of pie goes here. Center it, goes over there, and do the same thing. Pin it, glue it, go ahead and applique, and your pie is finished.
It has been baked.
That's right, at 350.
So let's talk about next the doing a little cross stitch on your gingham.
All right.
I love all these ginghams that you had added to your collection, and they were meant just for doing this project, weren't they?
That's right. Like I said earlier, my grandma taught me how to cross stitch on gingham when I was young, so I wanted to bring that back.
So many fun colors, and that's why we have the sampler pack for the sew along, just this fun size of your chunky thread.
Yeah, all you need is this size here, but it does come in skeins. I have the first 8 colors we have now. We'll be adding more soon, but we have 2 extra colors as well. But you can crochet, you can knit, you can weave, you can stitch with it, and that's why I call it chunky thread. It's yarn and thread. both.
So we got our basic white, but these are all the colors that you're going to be using in the quilt, which are in the sampler pack.
That's right.
So let's talk about cross stitching.
Okay, so I've started a row here and I'm just going to finish one and show you how. Before I finish this row, I should talk about these little frames. You can use a hoop. I use these Q-snap frames, and I like to keep my work flat when I'm cross stitching and for the tension. So I like to just use some scrappy fabric from my stash and sew some strips around so I'm not cutting the gingham great big. I'll just use leftover fabrics from something, and so that it will fit into the hoop and I don't have to worry about my edges. But afterwards we'll be trimming this up to 4.5 inches. So
you
we
sew
have
it
plenty
on
of room.
temporarily.
Yeah,
This
it's
is
just
a temporary.
I don't even unpick it because, or unsew, however you want to say, because the ruler is 4.5 inches. It will just cut it right off. And then you could cut this off if you wanted and use it for the next one. So it will show on the pattern where to start centered and things like that. And so as in cross stitch, you don't start with a knot, you just kind of cover your stitches so that you don't have any knots. So I'm just continuing that with this, and I'm going all the same direction. So I needed to skip this. This is where the button goes. And I go 1, 2, 3, and I just go in. I'm using my red needle, which is the chunky needle out of my nifty needle pack. And this is where the hoop really comes in handy. The reason we have, that I've done the chunky thread for this is because the squares are pretty big on the gingham and floss would just be too thin. But, I really like the texture that it adds to it as well.
Absolutely, it looks great.
So now I'm just going back the other direction and finishing that row before I start a new one.
That's the basics of cross stitch.
That's right. So simple.
One direction and come back on the other direction.
That's right. And you just go down in. And that really is it. I just continue on doing row by row until I'm finished. And like I say, I won't do a knot when I'm finished. I'll just put my needle under all my stitches and pull it through and trim it off. All right, so just pretend it's finished, the flower's finished. I just wanted to show you, you just take the 4.5 inch trim it ruler and you can just line it up here, and you can see that I have plenty of room around the edges so that you don't have to worry about, which square you kind of started in, but there is a center guide on.
That's what's so great about the trim
guide.
rulers is it's easy to.
Yeah, well, you can center it exactly because of the lines going all of those ways. So that's what you do, and finish the rest of the flowers.
And so fun to use this chunky thread to cross stitch.
I'm really having fun with it.
And so Lori's got lots of projects in the works using the chunky thread in the skeins.
That's right. I'm doing a crochet project right now, so check in on my blog.
So check back often on fun projects to use with the chunky thread, and join us for the Let's Bake Sew Along.